The .38 caliber revolver pressed against Mike Tyson's temple at exactly 9:47 p.m. on a Tuesday night in Catskill, New York. The 15-year-old's eyes, usually filled with rage, went wide with pure terror. Teddy Atlas's hand didn't shake. In the kitchen doorway, an 11-year-old girl clutched her torn shirt, tears streaming down her face. Cus D'Amato's footsteps thundered down the stairs. For 38 seconds, time stopped. The most dangerous teenager in America had a gun to his head, and the man holding it was the only person besides Cus who truly understood what Mike Tyson could become. But 12 hours earlier, when Mike walked out of that same kitchen with a sandwich, laughing at something on TV, nobody could have imagined that by morning everything would be different, that the father-son relationship between Cus D'Amato and Teddy Atlas would shatter, that Mike Tyson would lose the one trainer who might have saved him from himself. The Victorian house overlooked the Hudson River like a fortress. Cus D'Amato had turned it into a boxing monastery, where broken boys came to be rebuilt into champions. Mike Tyson arrived at 13, fresh from Tryon School for Boys, a juvenile detention center. The courts gave him one last chance, live with this old Italian boxing trainer, or go to real prison. Within 18 months, Tyson had become the most feared amateur in New York State. His sparring partners quit. Grown men refused to get in the ring with him. At 15, he hit harder than most professionals. But power wasn't what made him special. It was the rage, pure hatred that Cus had learned to channel into violence. Every morning at 5 a.m., Teddy Atlas would drive up that hill to train the boy who slept in Cus's house and called Cus his father. Atlas was 26, a former street fighter from Staten Island, with scars on his face. Cus trusted him with his greatest discovery since Floyd Patterson. The girl's name was Jennifer, 11 years old, Teddy Atlas's niece, visiting for the summer. She'd come to the gym to watch her uncle train fighters, doing homework while men tried to hurt each other in the ring. Tyson noticed her immediately. He always noticed vulnerability. He started small, jokes, compliments, the kind of attention that made a shy 11-year-old feel special. Atlas was in the ring when he heard his niece laugh, a nervous laugh. He looked through the ropes and saw Tyson standing too close, his hand on her shoulder. Atlas called him into the ring. They sparred for 12 rounds. Tyson's nose bled, but Atlas knew punishment wouldn't fix this. That night, Atlas told Cus what he'd seen. The old man's face darkened. "Boys will be boys," he said finally. Atlas felt something cold settle in his stomach. Cus D'Amato, the moral compass of boxing, was going to look the other way, because Mike Tyson was the future. 3 days passed. Atlas watched Tyson like a hawk, kept Jennifer away from the gym. Then Tuesday arrived. Atlas was in the kitchen, making coffee, when he heard the scream. Not a playful shriek, a scream of pure fear. He ran toward the sound, found them in the back hallway. Jennifer's shirt was torn. Tyson had her pressed against the wall, his hand over her mouth. Their eyes met, Atlas and Tyson, and Atlas saw everything. No remorse, no shame, just cold calculation. Atlas grabbed Tyson by the throat, slammed him against the opposite wall. Tyson didn't fight back. He smiled. That smile said, "You can't touch me. I'm Kite's boy." Atlas let go, walked to his car, opened the glove compartment. The gun had been there for years. He'd promised himself he'd never touch it again. He walked back into the house, found Tyson in the kitchen, eating an apple like nothing had happened. Outside, Atlas said, "Now." The backyard was dark, lit only by the kitchen window. Tyson walked out slowly, still chewing. Atlas pulled out the gun. Tyson's smile vanished. The apple fell. "Turn around," Atlas said. Tyson didn't move. Atlas cocked the hammer. The click echoed across the yard. Tyson turned. Atlas pressed the barrel against the back of his head. "You feel that?" Tyson nodded, his body shaking. "That's what you made her feel. That terror. How does it taste?" Tyson's voice cracked. "I don't. If you ever touch her again, if you ever touch any girl like that again, I will kill you. Not hurt you, kill you." The gun pressed harder. Tyson's legs buckled. He went to his knees in the dirt. 20 seconds had passed. In the kitchen window, a shadow appeared. Cus D'Amato, looking out at his two boys. Atlas saw him but didn't lower the gun. "You think you're special," Atlas whispered. "You think your fists make you God, but you're nothing. Just another punk who hurts people weaker than him. And one day, when Cus isn't around to protect you, you'll remember this moment. You'll remember that someone saw through you." 30 seconds. Tyson sobbed. Real tears. The tears of a child who'd been abandoned by everyone, who'd learned that the only way to matter was to hurt people. "Please," he whispered. "Please don't kill me." Atlas felt the weight of the gun. One pull of the trigger, and boxing history changes. No rape trial, no ear-biting. Just a troubled kid who died before he could become a troubled man. 38 seconds. Cuss's voice cut through the darkness. Teddy, put it down. Atlas didn't move. I said put it down. Cuss stood in the doorway, his voice carrying 60 years of authority. He touched Jennifer, Atlas said. He's 15, Cuss replied. And he's my son, Cuss said. The words hung in the air like a confession. Atlas lowered the gun. Tyson stayed on his knees, crying. Get up, Cuss told him. Go to your room. Tyson ran. Atlas had never seen him move so fast. Cuss walked over, held out his hand for the gun. Atlas gave it to him. You're done here, Cuss said quietly. Pack your things. Don't come back. You're choosing him over what's right, Atlas said. I'm choosing the future over the past, Cuss replied. Atlas walked to his car, drove away from the Victorian house, away from the boy who would become exactly what Atlas feared. The next morning, Tyson woke to find Atlas's locker cleaned out. Cousins told the other trainers that Atlas had taken a job elsewhere. Nobody asked questions. Jennifer never came back to Catskill. The incident was buried deep. 3 years later, Tyson became the youngest heavyweight champion in history. He stood in the ring, belt around his waist, and thanked Cuffs D'Amato. He didn't mention Teddy Atlas. Nobody did. It was like he'd never existed. But in quiet moments, Tyson could still feel the cold metal against his skull, still hear Atlas's voice. You're nothing. The prediction came true. Without Atlas to check his demons, Tyson spiraled. The rape conviction, the bankruptcy, the face tattoo. Years later, Atlas became a respected television commentator. Tyson became a pop culture punchline. They'd see each other at boxing events, nod politely, pretend that night never happened. But both men knew the truth. In 38 seconds with a gun to his head, Mike Tyson had been given a chance to change, to feel what his victims felt, to understand that strength without mercy is just brutality. He'd felt it. And then, protected by an old man's ambition, he'd forgotten it. The gun hadn't killed Mike Tyson that night. But the man who walked away from that backyard was worse than dead. He was empty, and he'd spend the next 40 years trying to fill that emptiness with violence, women, drugs, money, fame. Anything to avoid remembering those 38 seconds when he was just a scared kid begging for his life from the only man who ever saw him for what he was. San Wenishlet Milchbulum, Tum Six Fazli Apio Lashmakichin. The Victorian house on the hill had been many things: a judge's mansion, a boarding house, a forgotten relic. Under Cuffs D'Amato's ownership, it became something else, a laboratory for manufacturing champions. Paint peeled from its sides, but inside, magic happened. The walls were covered with fight posters from the Golden Age. Joe Louis, Rocky Marciano, Floyd Patterson, Cuffs' first heavyweight champion, proof that his methods worked. Mike Tyson arrived at that house with nothing but the clothes on his back and a rap sheet that read like a preview of hell. Robbery, assault, intimidation. His mother was dead. His father was a ghost. The streets had raised him, and they'd done a terrible job. Cuss saw something others missed. Not just the obvious, the incredible hand speed, the natural power, the instinct for violence. He saw the fear underneath. The kind of fear that came from never having anyone who gave a damn. That fear could be shaped, directed, turned into something useful, or it could metastasize, become something monstrous. Everything depended on who held the chisel. For 18 months, the experiment worked. Tyson absorbed Cuss's teachings like a sponge, the peekaboo style, the mental conditioning, the mantras about discipline and controlled aggression. By 15, he was a prodigy. Amateur champions twice his age couldn't last 3 rounds with him. Everyone predicted greatness. Everyone except Teddy Atlas. Atlas had come to Cuffs, the same way Tyson did, as damaged goods looking for salvation. The scar on his face told the story. A street fight at 17, a knife, a lesson about the price of violence. Cuffs had saved him, given him purpose, taught him that fighting could be noble if done for the right reasons. Now Atlas was paying it forward, training the next generation. He and Tyson had connected immediately, 2 predators recognizing each other. Atlas knew how to reach him, how to channel the rage without letting it consume everything. During their sessions, Atlas would make Tyson talk about his mother, the prostitute who died when he was 16, about the men who'd visited their apartment, about hiding in closets, covering his ears, pretending the world outside didn't exist. Slowly, carefully, Atlas was building something, not just a fighter, a human being. Jennifer arrived on a Thursday in July. Her parents' divorce had turned ugly, the kind where lawyers got rich and children got scarred. Atlas offered to take her for the summer, give her some peace. She was a quiet kid, all knees and elbows, more interested in books than boxing. But she liked watching her uncle work, liked the way he turned angry boys into disciplined men. She'd sit on the bleachers with her homework, occasionally looking up when someone landed a particularly good combination. The gym had rules, unspoken but absolute. Trainers' families were off limits. You didn't talk to them, didn't look at them, didn't acknowledge they existed. It was a matter of respect and survival. Cross that line and you'd answer to everyone. Tyson broke the rule within days. A comment about her hair as he walked past, a joke that made her smile nervously. Then standing too close, finding excuses to be where she was. Atlas noticed but initially dismissed it. The kid was awkward around girls, hadn't been socialized properly. Maybe he was just trying to be friendly in the only way he knew how badly. But then came Tuesday, the hand on the shoulder, the whisper in the ear, the body language that screamed predator. Atlas had called him into the ring, given him the beating of his life. 12 rounds of punishment designed to send a message. Tyson had taken it all and smiled. That's when Atlas knew they had a problem. The conversation with Cassis that night should have ended it, should have resulted in boundaries, consequences, a clear message that some lines couldn't be crossed. Instead, Atlas got boys will be boys, and a lecture about not derailing championships over misunderstandings. He'd argued until his throat was raw, talked about patterns, escalation, what happened when you let someone test limits without pushback. But Cuss had made his choice. The future mattered more than the present. Greatness excused everything. Atlas left that meeting, knowing something fundamental had changed. The man he'd thought of as a father had revealed himself to be just another enabler, another person willing to sacrifice the weak for the strong. 3 days of uneasy peace. Atlas kept Jennifer close, made excuses, hoped the beating had sent the message words couldn't. Then Tuesday morning, coffee brewing, Jennifer doing homework, the scream that changed everything. He found them in seconds, but it felt like hours. His niece pressed against the wall, shirt torn, Tyson's hand over her mouth. Their eyes met, and Atlas saw the truth. This wasn't impulse, this was calculation. Tyson had waited, planned, struck when he thought no one would hear. The smile on his face wasn't embarrassment at being caught, it was amusement at Atlas's shock, as if to say, "What did you expect? You know what I am." The throat slam was instinct. The walk to the car was decision. The gun in his hand was destiny. Some moments in life are rehearsals, others are the performance. This was the performance. Everything that had come before, the street fights, the violence, the promises to change, had been leading to this backyard, this choice, this gun against this boy's head. Outside, now, 2 words that changed 3 lives. Tyson saw the gun, and his whole persona crumbled. The baddest teenager in New York suddenly looked like what he was. A child who'd pushed too far and found the edge of the world. The backyard was where Coos taught his fighters to shadowbox, where champions had been built one repetition at a time. Sacred ground in its way, now it would be something else. The place where Mike Tyson learned what fear really meant. Not the fear of losing a fight or disappointing a father figure. The fear of ceasing to exist, of becoming nothing more than a cautionary tale whispered in gyms. Turn around. Tyson hesitated. Boys who'd grown up hard didn't turn their backs on guns. Turn around, or I'll do this facing you. He turned. Atlas approached, placed the barrel against the base of his skull, the medulla oblongata, the off switch. One pull, and the lights go out forever. You feel that? The question wasn't rhetorical. Atlas needed him to feel it, to understand it, to carry it forever. That's what you made her feel. That helplessness. That knowledge that someone else controls whether you live or die. How does it taste? Tyson's whole body shook. The future heavyweight champion, the man who would terrorize a division, reduced to shivers and whimpers. I asked you a question. It tastes like shit, Tyson whispered. At least he was honest. Good, remember it, because if you ever touch her again, if you ever make another girl feel this way, I'll find you. Could be next week, could be in 10 years, but I'll find you, and I'll finish this. The gun pressed harder. Through the kitchen window, Custamato watched his 2 boys, one holding death, one waiting for it. Atlas saw him but didn't stop. Let the old man see the price of his choices. Let him understand that boys will be boys had consequences. 20 seconds, 30 seconds. Tyson's knees gave out. He dropped into the dirt where so many champions had trained. Now he knelt like a penitent, waiting for absolution or execution. Atlas followed him down, kept the gun in place. You think you're special because you can hurt people, but you're not special. You're typical. Every prison is full of guys just like you. Only difference is you can punch. Tyson sobbed, 15 years old, 200 pounds of muscle, crying like the child he'd never been allowed to be. Please don't kill me. I'm sorry. I won't do it again. I swear. The words every victim wants to hear. But Atlas knew better. Sorry was just a sound people made when they were caught. It meant nothing without consequence. And Kunz would make sure there were no consequences. Not for his special boy. Not for his ticket to immortality. 38 seconds. That's how long Mike Tyson lived with death pressed against his skull. How long he felt what his victims felt. How long he was just another scared human, hoping for mercy. Then comes his voice. Teddy. Put it down. The spell broke, but the lesson remained. Or should have remained. Atlas lowered the gun. Not because Cus commanded it, but because he'd made his point. Tyson scrambled to his feet, ran for the house. Cus approached, hand outstretched. They both knew this was the end. You couldn't put a gun to the golden goose and stay in the barnyard. He's 15, Cus said, as if age excused everything. He's a predator, Atlas replied, and you just gave him permission to hunt. They didn't argue. There was nothing left to say. Atlas handed over the gun, walked to his car where Jennifer waited. As they drove away, he looked back once. Cus was helping Tyson inside, comforting him, protecting him, enabling him. The next morning, it was like Teddy Atlas had never existed. His locker was empty. His name was erased. The other trainers were told he'd taken another job, a personality conflict. Nothing serious. Boxing was full of such stories. Trainers came and went. Only the fighters mattered. Jennifer never returned to Catskill. Her parents were told she was homesick. The truth was buried deeper than any body. Atlas never spoke of it publicly. Who would believe him? Who would care? He was just another trainer. Tyson was the future, and what a future it was. 3 years later, the youngest heavyweight champion in history, everything Cus had dreamed of, achieved just after the old man died. Tyson stood in the ring, draped in gold, and thanked his father figure for everything. No mention of the trainer who tried to save him from himself. History is written by the winners, and Tyson was winning. But winning in the ring couldn't fill the emptiness inside. The gun had shown him what he was. Scared, weak, human. He spent the next decades trying to prove that moment wrong, trying to become the monster everyone feared, and succeeding beyond anyone's nightmares. The rape conviction in Indianapolis. Desiree Washington, 18 years old, alone in a hotel room with a man who'd learned that power meant no rules. The ear-biting in Vegas. Evander Holyfield's blood in his mouth. The crowd screaming, the beast fully unleashed. The spiral was exactly what Atlas had predicted. Without someone to check his demons, Tyson became them. Every scandal, every assault, every moment of madness could be traced back to that night in Catskill, to the choice cuts made, to the gun that didn't fire. Years became decades. Atlas built a career on television, his scarred face and brutal honesty perfect for a sport built on both. He trained champions, wrote books, became everything Cus said he couldn't be. Tyson became a cautionary tale, who somehow kept getting curtain calls. From the baddest man on the planet to a joke on late-night TV, they'd pass each other at boxing events. Two old men carrying the weight of a moment. They'd nod, shake hands for the cameras, pretend that night in 1982 never happened. But it did happen. For 38 seconds, Mike Tyson knelt in the dirt with a gun to his head. For 38 seconds, he felt what his victims felt. For 38 seconds, he had a chance to change. The gun didn't fire that night. Maybe it should have. Because the man who stood up from that dirt was worse than dead. He was empty. A hollow champion who filled himself with other people's pain. And somewhere, Teddy Atlas still keeps a gun in his glove compartment. Not the same one that died with Cus, but another one, just in case. Because some lessons you only get to teach once. And if you fail, you spend the rest of your life watching the consequences multiply. Watching the world celebrate a monster you could have stopped. 38 seconds. That's all it took. That's all it ever takes.